According to experts, California's GDP will soon be larger than Japan's, and the odds of that occurring are relatively high. It's been predicted that this will happen eventually. An economic crisis will hit Japan during the next decade, and the country will lose at least 15% of its GDP. There will be many people out of work, billions of dollars in lost revenue, and the radical reorganization of the Japanese economy. And the root of the problem is an inability to adapt to the changing times and a consequent lack of faith in the automobile industry's promising future. First of all, the New York Times recently announced that California's GDP will soon exceed Germany's, and Germany's declining GDP is a major contributor. California's population is substantially smaller than that of Germany and much smaller than Japan's. However, most of the world's major corporations are still headquartered in the Golden State. There are currently almost 39 million people living in California. With a population of over 82 million, Germany's GDP doesn't seem proportional to its size. What is much more essential is genuinely encouraging innovation and assisting entrepreneurs. Whether firms can evolve, they can adapt, or companies can emerge from nothing, develop new goods, produce new things, and make new electric automobiles. California is home to headquarters of many of the world's largest corporations. Many major tech and financial companies call California home, including Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Wells Fargo, and many more. The state of California's economy has shown a remarkable resilience by surviving the pandemic and the recent time of high inflation. After the United States, China, and Japan, the Golden Gate's GDP will be the fourth biggest in the world. Moreover, the state of California's GDP has increased over the past 30 years in a row, and this trend is clearly visible in any set of statistics. As far as economies go, it has shown to be the most robust and stable throughout time. The trend in California is best shown by the widening gap in the market capitalization among the state's 379 enterprises worth at least $1 billion. That number also includes Germany's 155 publicly listed companies achieving this level of excellence. And so, this suggests that the number of billion-dollar enterprises headquartered in California is much higher than the national average. However, California companies had increase of 147% and 117% in revenue and market value, respectively, over the same time. According to Bloomberg, Germany will need returns lower than 41% and 34%. Germany's nominal GDP reached 4.2 trillion last year, surpassing California's 3.4 trillion by the lowest margin on record. Germany's car sector is the country's largest single source of employment, sustaining millions of jobs, but the situation is much worse in Japan. According to some reports, the automobile sector is responsible for as much as 89% of Japan's GDP. Japan is the third biggest economy in the world and has about 120 million people. However, many predict California's GDP will soon be larger than Japan's. Japan has been the world's second largest exporter of automobiles over the past decade, and although it produces almost 9 million cars annually, it only imports around 2 million. About 7 million automobiles are sent abroad annually, but almost all of those exported vehicles aren't entirely electric, and most of these cars run on gasoline. So, there's no denying that Japanese industries are not geared up for producing and exporting electric vehicles. According to recent research, if Japan doesn't start making more electric cars soon, the country's GDP will plummet by 15%. The Climate Group is an international non-profit organization working to mobilize people worldwide to address climate change since 2003. And according to their data, domestic EV sales in Japan are significantly lower than in critical countries like Europe, China, and the United States. In reality, during the past 2 years, sales of electric vehicles in Japan have fallen, and less than 1% of Japan's automobile sales are of this type. That may be of little concern to the neighborhood anyhow. However, given that just 2 million of Japan's produced automobiles are purchased in Japan, if Japan wants to keep or continue exporting around 80% of the vehicles it manufactures, it will have to entirely modify what those vehicles are. Europe, China, and the United States are the primary places for the remaining 7.5 million. If Japan moves forward with EV production, it will be at a severe competitive disadvantage compared to domestic companies in the United States. This is because the new Inflation Reduction Act awards $7,500 in tax credits to US-based automakers to produce electric vehicles. However, this does not account for additional incentives, such as producing batteries in the United States. Japan must thus incur the much higher transportation expenses incurred over the previous 3 years when sending automobiles to the United States. Furthermore, the tax credit plus the battery credits will put them at a significant cost disadvantage. The situation seems even worse when looking at Japan's export to China and Europe. So, when it comes to the automobiles, Japan is second to none in terms of export to China. But by the end of 2023, it is expected that 45% of car sales in China will be entirely electric automobiles. Experts predict China would lose interest in Japanese automobile built in Japan since the country does not produce any electric vehicles. The report says that many of the world's biggest car markets plan to stop selling cars with internal combustion engines by 2030s. Furthermore, it is well known that the European Union will no longer permit the sale of gas-powered cars beyond 2035. What are the Japanese government plans for the thousands of gasoline-powered vehicles they make annually? You see, over a third of the world's automobiles are sold in China, and between 26 to 27 million cars will be purchased this year. But keep in mind that the Chinese are major buyers of EVs, and they have a little enthusiasm for internal combustion engine cars. And so, if Japan cannot manufacture electric vehicles, it will face severe economic consequences. Japan has a sizable economy but relies heavily on the export and manufacturing of automobiles. GDP in Japan will certainly fall, but economists don't expect the country to lose half of its exports. They anticipate a drop in value of almost 80%. The Japanese government's EV domestic goals lag behind those of other major countries. In 2035, the EU plans to outlaw the use of automobiles powered by internal combustion engines. In addition, by 2030, it is improbable that any other kind of car will be sold in China other than EVs and PEVs. The Japanese government flatly rejected the COP26 2040 aim, and Japan was named Fossil of the Day due to the country's stubbornness in adopting green energy in transportation. Now, before we continue, I'd like to thank you for getting this far. And if you want to know more Japan's falling behind EVs, then make sure to stick till the end. The Japanese auto industry appears to be significantly investing in hydrogen-powered vehicles, believing that these vehicles represent the industry's future. The sad reality is that it's already too late. It is predicted in the paper that Japan's economy would suffer severe long-term consequences as a result of the country's present course and long-standing hostility to EVs. More than 13% of the world's passenger vehicles are presently supplied by businesses based in Japan, and 82% of Japanese-owned vehicle production is exported. And by the end of this decade, that figure will have to drop to no more than 5%. Let's consider the massive chunk of Japan's workforce that works in the car industry. Millions of jobs across the country will be lost due to this. Even Toyota has confirmed this and claimed the same thing. And over 5 million people, or about 8% of Japan's labor force, work directly in the automobile industry. In contrast, it is widely believed by economists and industry experts that the automobile sector creates 10 new jobs for everyone that is lost. That might imply as many as half of Japan's workforce is involved in the automobile sector in some capacity, whether as direct workers or as members of the many ancillary businesses that provide services such as component manufacture and retail sales. As of right now, this estimate claims that 1.7 million jobs will be lost. So, what should Japan do to progress? How can they work to counteract these issues and the halt of the tremendous loss they're facing? The unfortunate reality is that oligarchies exist in most of Japan, and only a handful of people wield enormous influence there. Let's put it this way: Toyota, Japan's largest firm, has a CEO who isn't just the CEO of Toyota. In fact, he is the head of executive of the whole Japanese car sector and has considerable influence in the country. Unfortunately, he has led Toyota and the whole Japanese automobile sector down to a destructive road by not supporting EVs and actively lobbying against them. But now, because of its wide variety of business, California isn't dependent on a single sector of the economy, and its industrial sector continues to expand each year. While many assume the oil and gas industries drive the California's economy, the truth is that mobile agriculture contributes more than the state's GDP than anything else. Every year, agriculture contributes around $100 billion to the economy through direct revenue and another $60 billion through ancillary economic activities. Yet when you add in all of California's other businesses and the fact that 15% of the Fortune 500 are headquartered there, it's easy to see that the state's GDP won't fall. This trend will persist for the foreseeable future, at least the next decade. And thankfully, California is not heavily reliant on the industrial sector. The manufacturing industry is significant in the state, although not the same scale as in Germany or Japan. The gross domestic product in Japan was $4.9 trillion in 2021. California had a GDP of $3.4 trillion that same year. However, throughout the last year, California's economy is projected to have increased to about $4 trillion. It is currently hard to predict when California's GDP will surpass Japan's. No one knows exactly when, but experts agree it will be before 2030. So, what do you think of this terrifically terrible news? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And while you're at it, make sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons as well. Now if you want to know more about Toyota's new plan, then make sure to click and watch this video right here. And enjoy! And that's the end of this video, guys. See you next time!